Hello there guys, welcome back to Titan Quest Build Guides. That's a new title. So in this build guide, in this video, I'm going to be covering the Shaman class. So the last few videos I've been covering the classes to do with the Rune Mastery from the new expansion Ragnarok. And in this one I'm going to cover the Shaman class, which consists of Spirit and Rune Masteries. Now the Shaman class, there are two pretty viable ways to go with. You can either go a Mage, so you'll be carrying mostly a staff and utilizing more of a spell casting and intelligence, or you can go more for a melee style. I think that's going to be pretty viable as well. So I'll begin with the Mage style more, because I think that one is probably a bit more suitable for this class. So for Mage style, I think the better of the two masteries to start with would be Spirit Mastery. Although you can start with Rune as well, but Spirit will have more skills that you will need to make this build really shine. And one of the main things will be the Ternion attack. So that's the that staff skill on the left here in Spirit, Ternion attack. That's going to be massively improve your staff attack. Mainly it's going to have 3 projectiles, and it's going to increase projectile speed and that kind of stuff. It is very energy costly though, so you have to keep in mind to have a huge, well, maybe not a huge energy pool, but you need a huge energy regeneration. So this is something you have to keep in mind. So Ternion attack is highly recommended, and I would advise you to make sure when you go for Ternion attack, that you sink quite a lot of points into it already. It's a lot like dual wield in Warfare Mastery, where with just 1 or 2 points it's going to be very weak and underpowered, and only once you put several points into it, that's when it becomes really effective. Then you have Death Ward. I normally just put 1 point in it it's not particularly powerful. I mean, it only triggers when your health is below 15%, which is not that great, and it only restores 330 health, which is pretty much nothing on legendary difficulty. But it does activate 13% damage absorption, so for the few seconds that actually could save your life. So 1 point is alright in that. Now next one, the Death Chilora. I'd say Death Chilora is very useful even for a mage, even though you could be mostly fighting from a distance. But Death Chilora is great because you'll still be getting some enemies coming close to you. And this is where Death Chilora will become incredibly useful, especially with all its Ravages of Time, debuff, and Necrosis, which completely reduces the enemy resistances. Life Drain, it's one of those skills that I always mention. It's pretty good in normal difficulty, but it loses its effectiveness pretty quickly as it goes down the line. So I wouldn't put points in it, because there are much better skills you can go for. And Enslave Spirit as well. This one is it's a bit of a novelty skill that you can really enjoy in the early game, but it loses its effectiveness later on, because there'll be a lot of enemies that you'll fail to enslave because of their level being much higher and stuff like that. Plus, most of them don't really last long enough to become really useful. Outsider, I'd pop 1 point in it, at least. I mean, if you have spare skill points, you can max it out later on, like in Legendary, but with 1 point, it's pretty good to help you tackle the more difficult enemies and bosses. So I definitely go for the Outsider. He's a temporary pet though, so he doesn't last for long. You summon him when you need to tackle the more difficult bits. Vision of Death, that's a great 1 point skill. So you mainly need this for several seconds of fear and confusion and all this, to making enemies just run around and panic. But, I mean, you don't need to really max it out unless you really want to towards the end and you have spare skill points, but one point is enough, really. Then you got Dark Covenant and Unearthly Power. Now, this is a nice temporary buff. Unearthly Power synergy especially, it increases your damage potential for several seconds, and you will utilize elemental and vitality damage, so this is where this comes useful. I mean, you'll be using a staff, so you'll have definitely elemental damage. You're not going to be really making use of physical and bleeding damage. It increases. And with the Dark Covenant, it vastly increases your energy regeneration, so it's pretty good. It is at the cost of your health though, but the cost of health is pretty small, so it's not too bad really. Then you have the Lich King. As most mages that utilize Spirit Mastery, Lich King is a must get, so he's great for damage dealing. He's a pretty strong pet. He's also good for getting some aggro from you. I mean, not as good as Codweller in that regard, but he's still good in that he will attack enemies and they'll go for him instead of you. So that's good. I'll definitely get As always I say, the skill itself, then you get the Wrath Shell and the Death Nova. Death Nova is the area attack, and the Wrath Shell basically makes him survive for much longer by giving him damage absorption. I don't usually bother with the Arcane Blast because you have your skill points to spend much better skills than that, and you want him to use his more powerful attacks like Lightning Bolt and Death Nova more than the Arcane Blast. Then you got the Spirit Ward and Spirit Bane. I always put 1 point in those. They're pretty great against the undead. I mean, you can put more points if you have spare skill points, but since undead is not the kind of monster type you meet all the time, you might not want to sink too many points in it. But yeah, with a couple of points here and there, it's a really great buff. And Circle of Power is something I don't usually get, but I mean, I suppose 1 point and stuff like that is not gonna hurt too much if you really do have spare skill points. It's one of those like temporary buffs, and it's only affect a certain area, so you just have to use it when you're likely to be just fighting like a boss or someone in a small area. Now for the rune skills, I decided not to go for Rune Weapon because Ternion Attack and Rune Weapon, they're both left mouse button skills, so you can only get one. And for a Mage Shaman, well, Ternion Attack is pretty much a no-brainer because Rune Weapon doesn't actually work with staffs, and if you are going a weapon but still want to concentrate on the mage aspects, you're gonna be dividing your skill points too far everywhere. So yeah, I don't go for Rune Weapon as a mage. Sacred Rage, as I mentioned in the previous videos, it's a great sort of emergency buff, so it's active like all the time, so it doesn't have a cooldown, so once your health drops below 40%, it's gonna trigger, so that's gonna keep you alive for longer. Reckless Offense, you don't really need to go with this class. Energy Armor, it's as I mentioned in previous videos, it's not quite as great as some other skills you could be getting. Runeward Feather, you're not gonna need as a mage because you're not gonna be using the offensive ability. You don't really need strength for weapons either. Now, Runeward Explode, I've done some research online and tried to find if it triggers with staffs, and I haven't found a definite answer. From what I've seen, it seems like it probably doesn't work with staffs, but I need the confirmation on that. I haven't managed to find any reliable source of information on whether it actually works with staffs. So you might wanna not go for the skill. I by accident put 1 point there. So if it does work with staffs, it could be pretty useful. Runeward Absorb, as it works not only with shields, but it also works with staffs, so it could come in handy because it actually absorbs the energy from enemy spells, so you really gonna be needing to use energy with this class, especially if you're going for Ternion Attack, which is gonna be very energy hungry. Thunderstrike, that's a great skill, as I always say, it's my favorite skill in the Rune Mastery, and it works with staffs as well. It just shoots like multiple projectiles at once. So yeah, definitely worth going for, and together with the synergy. Don't really go for Seal of Fate, you have much better skills to go for, and as I mentioned before, it's way too small of an area and it takes a while to charge up. If you really want to go for those kind of area skills, and Circle of Power and Spirit is probably going to be better than that. Same with the Runic Mines, not really going to be not that badass as they may sound. Seal of Life, every rune class should really make use of this because of the bonuses to the resistances. You're not gonna utilize much of the strength bonus that you get as a mage, but you really need that bleeding and vitality damage resistances. And lastly, the Guardian Stones and Menhir Wall. Well, if it's not a must really, but as a mage, if you do want to have some extra barrier to stop enemies from coming close, then Guardian Stones could be pretty good. But otherwise, you could probably spend your points in other. I mean, 1 point in other is enough, I think. So now I'm not gonna spend too much time. I'm gonna go into the melee, and I'm gonna show just how it's different to the mage. So the melee, one of the main differences is that I think with the melee it'll be better to go for Rune Mastery first rather than Spirit, and the reason for that is because you can get the Rune Weapon skill. Now Rune Weapon skill is gonna be pretty much the only left mouse button skill you can use with this class for melee builds. So Rune Weapon is gonna be pretty good, and I'll probably go for pretty much the first 3 skills definitely. I mean, for the second one, which provides the magical charge, which provides elemental retaliation, it's pretty strong in normal difficulty, and although it's gonna lose its effectiveness later on, and it is pretty costly for 16 points. Together with Death Chill Aura, it could be quite a powerful aura combination, because you have a Death Chill Aura to weaken the enemies, and you have that elemental damage retaliation, which is going to be pretty decent combination together. So I definitely go for the first three. Transmutation, probably not going to find too much use out of that, unless you solely concentrate on elemental damage, which you probably won't as a melee build. You would go for Rune Void Feather, because as a melee build you're going to rely on offensive ability a lot, so Rune Void Feather definitely. And Rune Void Explode, I'd put at least 1 point in it, although if you have spare skill points you can max it out. Rune Void Absorb, if you're carrying a shield, then yeah, definitely go for that. Thunder Strike, yes, same. And Seal of Life as well. You probably don't need to go for Guardian Stones or any other skills in Rune Mastery. And then Spirit Mastery, now you're not going to be going for Ternion attack anymore, so that frees up a lot of skills. Well, those skills will go into a Rune Weapon. You definitely go for Death Chill Aura. That's going to be one of your main skills with this class as a melee build. So I would actually pick up the Spirit Mastery as soon as you can and sink in points in Death Chill Aura. That's going to make your life that much easier. And pretty much everything else in Spirit remains the same as it was with the Mage build. Although with the Lich King, you're going to be running quite short on skill points here, so as a Lich King becomes less important than you would have as a mage, because as a mage you'll be more fragile, you need someone to help you out. With a melee build, you're probably going to be having some better armor to protect yourself with, but still having a Lich King is going to be pretty decent, pretty useful. So I'd get him at least put a few points in Death Nova and Wrath Shell, just so he can deal a bit more damage and survive for longer. But otherwise, yeah, pretty much remains the same as with the Mage build. Now let's just have a look at the attributes. So you're gonna go completely different attributes whether you're going Mage or melee. For the Mage, you're gonna put most points in Intelligence, because you want as much elemental damage output as possible. And Intelligence, since Anniversary Edition, Intelligence also increases your Vitality damage. So whether you're doing Vitality damage or you're concentrating on Elemental, with this class, Intelligence is going to be very useful there. I would also advise to put some points in Dexterity, because, well, first of all, you need your defensive ability. You don't want to get too low. And second of all, some of the Mage gear is going to have a Dexterity requirement, so you do need to get some points in Dexterity. Don't neglect Dexterity completely. And you might want to put some points in Energy. As I said, this is going to be quite an energy-hungry class, especially if you're going for turn-on attack. So, some points in Energy will be very useful. And as a melee build, you pretty much, as a melee build, should treat this as a hybrid class, because that's pretty much what its gameplay is going to be revolving around. So I'd suggest to go for roughly a ratio of 2 points in strength per 1 point in intelligence and 1 point in dexterity. You can avoid intelligence entirely, but then some of the skills are not going to, you're going to lose out on the effectiveness of some of the skills. So particularly like Thunder Strike, that has some of the elemental with it, and also the Rune Weapon is pretty much got some elemental damage in it as well. So you might want to put some points in intelligence, definitely. You don't need to put too much in intelligence, because Rune Weapon is going to help you out with that, with its 100% intelligence buff. But your main stat is going to be strength with a melee build, so strength is still going to be the mains. So I hope you enjoyed this build guide, and feel free to make suggestions for whichever rune build you want me to make next. And see you guys later. Bye bye.